Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day, and we thank you that we could come together freely and worship you. We ask that you would pour out your Holy Spirit now as we begin this class, and we'd ask that we'd understand these things and that we could internalize them, and not just a thought knowledge, Lord, but that these things would change us and sanctify us, that we could be prepared for the world to come. And we thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
There's a few things that need to be addressed. One is on Sabbath, the claim was made that Saul was anointed 3 times. How many times was Saul anointed?
Twice.
Twice. Still in twice. Well, I went looking for the word, but you said 3. All right, I'm still looking. I've only found 1 time, but we'll go back into that. I'm just saying that's something we had to go back into. This class, in terms of what's being recorded, isn't aware of that. And somewhere over the past, since I started studying Esther's, over the past 2.5 months or so probably, I had it in my head. And the class was trying to correct me yesterday, but I wasn't getting what they were saying. I had it in my head that Agag was the first test of Saul, and it wasn't. It's the second test. So what I've been saying about Agag and Haman, we'll have to go back in and look at that, but we'll go through Esther first. But third thing, not really a correction, but a fine-tuning, because this is still being developed. It's what Tanya brought up yesterday. I don't remember exactly when we addressed this, but Tanya's translating these things into Romanian. And so if you go, we'll deal with this one. We'll put the other 2 on hold, and when we get this dealt with, then we'll go back to Esther. But let's go to Genesis 45. And we might as well put some emphasis on this if you've all been hearing it, but it may not be settled in your mind yet, that, how to illustrate this. The northern kingdom, it comes into existence in the history of Jeroboam Jeroboam I, okay? And at that time, this will be Israel. And at that time, then you have Judah starting with Rehoboam. But the story of this divided kingdom includes the story of Solomon back here. Solomon, because of his apostasy, has 3 enemies raised up against him. One of them is Jeroboam too. And Jeroboam knows that Solomon is his enemy, so he flees into Egypt, and this is part of this story. And he doesn't come back out of Egypt until Solomon's dead. And when Solomon's dead, Rehoboam calls all of Israel together, and this is where they're asking Rehoboam, are you going to rule over us as roughly as your father did, or not? And because he says he's going to chastise him with scorpions, the kingdom is rent in 2. But before this time, when Jeroboam is at odds with Solomon, Jeroboam's walking, and a prophet, is it Ahijah or something? Something like that, takes his garment and divides it into 10 pieces. So this is Jeroboam's representing the 10 kingdoms based upon a prophecy. Jeroboam could have been righteous. The promise that the prophet gave him, if he would have ordered a righteous kingdom, the Lord would have blessed him. But there was never any righteous kings in this kingdom. So what I'm saying is, in this beginning history of the dividing of the kingdoms, you see Jeroboam going into Egypt. And this is the story. The first division of this kingdom is illustrated in the story of Joseph. Benjamin is about 7 to 9 years old. Maybe someone knows perfectly, but the way I've calculated it roughly. Benjamin's 7 and 9 years old, so he's not out with his older brothers tending the sheep. That means there's 10 of them out there. And because I've also looked to see if the scriptures or Sister White says that those brothers there were 10, and I haven't found that. You have to determine it based upon Benjamin's age, that he wouldn't be out there with him. But you want to see the 10, because Joseph goes out to the 10 brothers, and they sell him into Egypt. This is typifying Jeroboam going into Egypt. And while he's in Egypt, Pharaoh's ultimately going to give him a wife, Joseph, and she's going to have 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. So Joseph in Egypt becomes the 2 tribes. And his 10 brothers are here. And the dividing there is the selling of Joseph into Egypt. This separation of Joseph, who's going to have Manasseh and Ephraim, is typifying the separation here in the time of Solomon. Okay. So in the story of Joseph, you're going to see the 2 sticks joined back together. And it's interesting that when the famine hits and his brothers start coming to him, that it's always 10 brothers. The 10 brothers come the first time and they leave Benjamin at home. But Joseph tells them, you're not going to get any more food unless you bring Benjamin. So they leave Simeon, I believe, in Egypt. And the 9 of them go back, and when they come back to Egypt, they're bringing Benjamin, so they're bringing 10 sons again. So both times they come back into Egypt to meet with Joseph, it's the number 10. And then ultimately, he reveals who he is. They go back, they get Jacob, and they all move down into Goshen. The point being is in this scenario, you're seeing the 2 tribes separated there when Joseph is sold into bondage, and then at the end of the time period, you're seeing the 2 sticks joined together. And we're already understanding that in our history, the 2 sticks get joined together with Jeroboam 2, and Zechariah and Jehoiachin and Zedekiah. All right, so the as we were seeing this in our studies in Genesis 45 through 47, the question comes up, what's taking place in the first 2 years of the famine? Okay, so you got your markers about the first 2 years. There's 7 years of famine. And once you see what takes place in the 7 years of famine, you can see the Sunday law in the United States, and you can see the world divided into 2 classes as it describes the effects of the famine. So if you go to Genesis 45, and the point we're doing this is I had marked that after 2 years of famine, you come to the Sunday law in the United States. But probably we're going to see it's 1 year. Okay. And what I was saying went on in the first 2 years, it looks like that there was more going on. But so in Genesis 45, Joseph is talking to his brothers, and it says in let's read verses 6 through 11. I'll read a verse, just one verse each, starting in verse 6. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which there shall neither be eating nor harvest. Earing or harvest.
And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance.
And God sent me before you to preserve you a posterity in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance.
One more.
So now it was not you that sent me hither, but God. And he hath made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt.
Haste ye, and go up to my father, and say unto him, Thus saith thy son Joseph, God hath made me lord of all Egypt. Come down unto me, and tarry not.
And thou shalt dwell in the land of Goshen, and thou shalt be near unto me, thou and thy children, and thy children's children, and thy flocks and thy herds, and all that thou hast.
Continue.
Yeah.
And there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty.
So how far is it from Egypt to Canaan? Time-wise. When children, there's a statement, when the children of Israel come out of Egypt to go to the promised land, is it 11 days?
I think so.
11 days journey. So for them to go get Jacob and come back, it's still the second year. All right. They get joined together in the second year of the famine. That would mean, what we're saying here, based upon the other lines, that right here, this is the second year. Because from the midnight cry to the Sunday law, this is where the two sticks get joined, but this is where they're being brought together, but they're joined right here. This is where the 11th hour
The
workers.
Sunday law, that makes sense, because in the 45:2, it talks about, and he wept aloud, which would probably put it in the loud cry time period.
Okay. But second year, everyone seeing that?
That was the Sunday law?
Yeah. Well, this is where this history is where the two sticks are getting joined together, but at the Sunday law, this is where the temple is cleansed, okay? And this is where God remembers. This is the Sunday law time period. This is where the 11th hour workers come in. This is Jacob coming out of Canaan into Goshen. Everyone understand that? Okay, so let's go to chapter 47, which is also going to talk about this second year. Let's read beginning with Jacob's in Egypt now, and he's blessing Pharaoh in verses 7 through 11. And he's been moved into Goshen. So in verse 12 of Genesis 47, let's take it up there. Brown, Kathy, one of you.
And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families.
And there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine.
What year is it? Jacob's back here. Jacob has just got back. This is second year. Okay. Tyler?
And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house.
Still the second year.
Yeah.
And when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, Give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth.
And Joseph said, Give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle, if money fail.
And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses, and for the flocks, and for the cattle of the herd, and for the asses, and he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year.
For what year?
That year.
The end of
Second
2
year.
years.
The end of 2 years. What years? The second year. Okay, so verse 18. When that year ended, they came unto the second year.
So you're saying that was the first year?
The first year.
Oh.
And they said unto him, We will not hide it from my lord, how that our money is spent. My lord also hath our herds of cattle. There is not left in the sight of my lord, but our bodies and our lands.
So then Jacob was being done in the first year?
So then Jacob was being
Being
done
nourished.
in the first year.
Because you connected all of that line together, right?
Yeah, when that year ended, they came unto him the second year.
Could that be a repeat and enlarge?
Could what be a repeat and
What we
enlarge?
just read about Joseph gathered all the money that was from the land of Egypt. Because this first is talking about his dad and how he fed all his house. And then he goes into about the people of Egypt. Could that be a repeat and enlarge? Or are we put in a chronological order saying that it's just continuing?
I don't know, but by verse 13, by verse 12 and 13 in that area, Jacob's already there talking to Pharaoh. but chapter 45 says that they come out in the second year.
Yeah.
Verse 6 of chapter 45. For these 2 years hath the famine been in the land, and yet there are 5 years in which they shall neither be eating nor harvest, and God has sent me before you. So in verse 11, and there will I nourish thee, for yet there are 5 years of famine, lest thou and thy household and all that thou hast come to poverty. Verse 13, and you shall tell my father of all the glory of Egypt. And so when he comes in here in chapter 47, it's the second year. Right?
I don't understand.
I don't yeah, because you just said it was the first year, by the verse
No. We're just reading scriptures. If we can figure out why chapter 45 isn't the second year, then let's figure it out.
It is.
It is the second year, all right? So we got to use that as a point of reference.
Okay.
So in verse 14 through wherever we ended there, in verse 18, when that year was ended. So Tanya is saying, if you go back to verse 14, she's raising the question now.
What, 45?
47.
47, 48.
Let's go to verse 13. Tanya's saying, okay, he's told the story of Jacob blessing Pharaoh and coming into Egypt up to verse 12, and Joseph puts them in Goshen. And then in verse 13, Tanya's suggesting, okay, now he's going back into the history of the famine. And it says, and there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very, very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan. She's saying this is now going back to the very first year of the famine, describing what's been going on. Okay? For the corn which they bought, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house, and when the money failed in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread, and why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. And Joseph said, give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fail.
If money
It's
fail,
just
that tells
repeating
you,
the story.
yeah.
It's just,
Yeah, I
it's
think
not
that's right.
chronological from the previous 45.
It's repeating the history.
Just saying, and then also this was how.
If money, that puts it in the present, in the future.
If money fail, yeah.
Okay,
If
Sister
money
Christie.
And I don't know if this means anything, but in verse 9, it says, the days of my years of pilgrimage is 130 years. So if we look at 130 years and use that as another mark, as far as if it's 1 year or 2 years. No.
Yeah,
It's
but you got to have
130.
some other points of reference. That's just hanging there in the middle of nowhere.
Verse 11 of 45. It says,
There is a chronology in there. How old was Joseph when he went into Egypt? The Bible tells us that. 17. And then there, at the end of this story, there's a 17-year period. So I know that you can go in there and really
So if you go back.
isolate some of these things. But I don't think we need to deal with this 130 years to work through this.
45:11 says that 2 years have passed, and there's still 5 years.
Yes. That is marking when Jacob came out of Canaan to
Right.
Egypt. Okay? And then it's continuing telling what happens when Jacob gets in Egypt up to verse 12 of chapter 47. And now it's doing a repeat and large. It's telling about what's taken place during the time period of the famine. Right?
And what will take place in the future if
So
the
when
corn faileth.
verse 15, and when money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, and the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. And Joseph said, give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fail.
So Jacob wasn't even there yet when he started doing this. Jacob hadn't even arrived.
Right.
Okay.
And I think it's saying there that Michael may have $1,000 and I may have 500. My money may fail before Michael's, and so when my money runs out, I can give him some of my cattle.
I was just thinking that because his brethren came with money. So they had money, but others didn't. So they were already selling themselves into it before the Canaanites. Or not Canaanites, sorry.
I think
Yeah.
because of the prophecy that they were thinking ahead, realizing that this is gonna go on for
They didn't believe the prophecy. Verse 17. And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses, and for the flocks, and for the cattle and herds, and for the asses, and he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. When that year was ended, they came unto him the second year. What's the second year?
That's when Jacob.
This is when Jacob arrives. And said unto him, We will not hide it from my Lord, how that our money is spent. My Lord also hath herds of cattle. There is not aught left in sight of my Lord, but our bodies and our lands. So you're at the second year. What has already been taken away in the first 2
The
years?
economic structure is already,
Their
they're poor.
Their money?
their cattle, their land, and their body.
Not their land.
Not their land and their bodies.
Not
The
their
land
bodies
starts
yet.
at the second year.
The
Oh,
cattle
came
and
But
into
he
the
said in the
money.
first 2 years.
The cattle and their money.
So the
their wealth.
first
When that year ended, what year is it talking about?
the first
The first
the
year.
first year, the money and their
Cattle.
cattle's gone.
Yeah, in the first year. Brother Mark, verse 19.
Wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh, and give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate.
So in the second year,
They're selling themselves.
they're selling themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. Sister Karen?
And Joseph brought all the land of
Bought.
bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over them. So the land became Pharaoh's, and as for the people, he removed them to cities from one end of the borders of Egypt even to the other end thereof. Only the land of the priest bought he not, for the priests had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their lands.
So, by the first year, would be here, right? Year 1, year 2. By year 1, the money in the cattle's gone. And what we were saying it before was it was year 2. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so in year 2, he's buying the people. And the land. And then it reaches a point where you have 2 classes. The people in the cities and the
Priests in the country.
priests have their own cities. Priests, I'm going to call it priest towns just to make a distinction. And what we were saying last time, what I was saying, is that this is Daniel 11:45. The world's divided into 2 classes. One is the glorious holy mountain, which is a symbol to a church, and the other is the seas, which is the people of the world in Daniel 11:45. So this here, it's got to be the Sunday law, because this is where the 2 sticks come together. This is where Jacob comes out of Canaan. So in the Sunday law crisis that begins here when the east wind hits at the midnight cry, all these things are going to get removed. From where? From the United States, and then every country on the globe is going to follow that same progressive So are the people of the United States and the land of the United States brought into bondage at the Sunday law?
They're already there.
Yeah, Sister White says they're paying homage to Rome, which means, and that word homage, you look it up. What is homage? Where does it come from?
It comes from
It comes from the feudal system, and the feudal system had to do with the world, the government owning the land, and you being allowed to work the land, and you were a peasant, and you had to bow down and surrender yourself and your land. It wasn't yours; you were just a slave there. And she says at the Sunday law we pay homage, so this is consistent with paying homage, and consistent with
So
the
there's
economic collapse.
There's two lines of truth going on there then.
Two lines of truth. What are the two lines of truth?
Well, Joseph and his 10 brethren are marking the two sticks coming together. But Joseph's also marking an oppressive power in this sense. If you're marking it in that sense there about the people in the land and the cattle, so he's symbolizing two different things.
Yep. Which is okay, right?
Yeah.
You see what he's saying?
Good and
That in this
evil.
story, this famine here that hits here, this is the famine of the virgins.
Oh, yeah.
In Amos 8,
Yeah.
10 through 12, is it? Where they're running to and fro in God's word. Okay, this is the famine of the virgins. But for 7 years of plenty, Joseph's been the wise virgins in this history that are gathering up the prophetic message that they're going to distribute to those people in this history. So Joseph's representing God's people at one level, but at the other level, he's representing how the one world government gets implemented, conquering the United States and then the world.
But and how God works in that time period.
Oh, you've also got the
Faithful.
people, so the cattle and the gold and all that. That's also represented in two different ways, because you've got representation several places in the Bible where they come and they give their gold and their cattle and all that to God's people. That will be Joseph. But in another sense, it's represented in this way where they're giving it to the state. The state's taking it from them. So there's also two symbols of that.
The scriptures teach that the 11th hour workers are what finance the loud cry message. So that's what he's saying here. This is the 11th hour workers financing the work of Joseph, which is the work of the midnight cry that leads into the loud cry.
But couldn't the midnight cry and the loud cry kind of overlap each other? Because Sister White, in many places she talks about at 9/11 when those twin buildings come down, the loud cry is already gone forth, almost like it's coming in.
It's just as the loud cry of the third angel began in 1888.
Right, so I mean,
The loud cry began on October 22nd, 1844.
all right.
What is the definition of the loud cry that no one ever seems to remember that Sister White says?
A swelling of
Increase of power.
Yeah.
Okay, so the loud cry is an increase of power, but it begins back here at the midnight cry. What's the midnight cry? An increase of power. It's both cries are talking about an escalation of power. Begins in earnest here. So what are we correcting? Before we were saying that the cattle and money were taken by the second year. We're fine-tuning this. By the second year, the people in the land, all this is taken. And then the next thing, I still believe, is Daniel 11, 40-45. It's the division of the world into two classes. The people go into one cities, the priests go into another cities. Into two divisions of. Pardon me?
That's a very good separation.
Okay. Everyone get that? In here? That's corrected. Let's go back to, all right, should we say fine-tune? Fine-tune sounds better.
What did you write underneath C's? What's that, GHM?
Glorious Holy Mountain.
Glorious Holy Mountain. That's Daniel 11, verse 45.
That's the same story there that's taking place in Joel 3. No, we looked at that.
It's the same story that's taking place in Joel 3. Remember, we looked at that. You're talking kind of quiet for that
Yeah.
machine.
No, I'm saying in Joel chapter 3, you've got the Gentiles are being awakened and come into the valley of Jehoshaphat, which means to contend. And then you've got, in verse 5 it says, "You've taken my silver and my gold and have carried into your temples my goodly pleasant things. The children also of Judah and the children of Jerusalem have you sold unto the Grecians." There's all the wealth and the people being sold right there in this time period where the heathen are awakened.
Where you at?
Joel chapter 3.
Joel 3 what?
No, just the whole chapter. Well, it starts off at the midnight cry and goes.
But
Lines
let's,
into the
let's
same.
not go there. We're just trying to make a correction in a previous presentation. And we've got to get through Esther and get it behind us as a point of reference. So, to Esther.
I thought you were gonna deal with Saul.
No, I'm going to do Saul and I'm going to do Agag after we get through Esther, Lord willing. So, did anyone remember where we left off yesterday? It was in chapter 2. So let's read...
21? Yeah, 21. Yeah, we're ready for 21.
Yeah, we got close to there. Let's read chapter 2 again, real quickly, 5 verses each. I'll start. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus was appeased, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what was decreed against her. Then said the king's servants that ministered unto him, "Let there be fair young virgins sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather together all the fair young virgins unto Shushan the palace, to the house of the woman, under the custody of Hege, the king's chamberlain, keeper of the women, and let the things for purification be given them, and let the maiden which pleaseth the king be queen instead of Vashti, and the thing pleased the king, and he did so." So they're gathering the virgins together, but we know from verse 19, it says, "And when the virgins were gathered together the second time," that there is 2 gathering of the virgins, and they're taken into Hege's house, which is does it say there, the house of the women. And later on, once they go in and see the king, they're taken into Sheshgaz's house, which is the house
Chamber.
of the concubine.
Concubine.
Okay, so 6 through 10.
Who had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captivity which had been carried away with Jeconiah king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon had carried away. And he brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. And the maid was fair and beautiful, whom Mordecai, when her father and mother were dead, took for his own daughter. So it came to pass, when the king's commandment and his decree was heard,
That's verse 4. Go ahead.
and when many maidens were gathered together unto Shushan the palace, to the custody of Hegai, that Esther was brought also unto the king's house, to the custody of Hegai, keeper of the woman.
I wonder why I have no idea what this is all about. But in verse 3, it's Hege, Hege, and where Mark's reading, it's Hegai. And then when you get down to verse 21, you're going to see 2 enemies of the king, Bigthan and Teresh. But when Bigthan is referenced again, it's Bigthana. So I wonder why we're seeing just basically one or 2 letters changed in these guys' names when you know they're the same guys. Because there isn't any accident. Sorry for interrupting you.
And the maiden pleased him, and she obtained kindness of him, and he speedily gave her things for purification, with such things as belonged to her, and 7 maidens which were meet to be given her out of the king's house. And he preferred her and her maids unto the best place of the house of the woman. Esther had not showed her people nor her kindred, for Mordecai had charged her that she should not show it.
And this is repeated in verse 20, that Esther has not showed the people, but verse 11 through 15,
And
Sister Fran?
Mordecai walked every day before the court of the women's house to know how Esther did and what should become of her. Now when every maid's turn was come to go into King Ahasuerus, after that she had been 12 months according to the manner of the women, for so were the days of their purification accomplished, to wit, 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with sweet odors, and with other things for the purifying of the women. Then thus came every maiden unto the king, whatsoever she desired was given her to go with her out of the house of the women unto the king's house. In the evening she went, and on the morrow she returned unto the second house of the women, to the custody of Shashgaz, the king's chamberlain, which kept the concubines. She came in unto the king no more, except the king delighted in her, and that she were called by name. And when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go in unto the king, she required nothing but what Hegai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her.
So Esther was taken unto King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebet, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast unto all his princes and his servants, even Esther's feast. And he made a release to the provinces, and gave gifts according to the state of the king.
Two more.
And when the virgins were gathered together the second time, then Mordecai sat in the king's gate. Esther had not yet showed her kindred, nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther did the commandment of Mordecai, like as when she was brought up with him.
Okay, let's put these things in place.
Brother Jeff,
Yeah.
would it be a stretch to point out that the changing of the houses could have to do with the sanctuary? We have the courtyard, the holy and the most holy. Would that be a stretch?
No, I think that fits the prophetic. I think that's what we're saying. Is it forget?
And also I want to
fits
point
the
out that
prophetic
Esther is
structure.
mentioned 46 times in the book of Esther. Just 45 verses, but mentioned 46 times.
So at this point, now, Brother Marks can explain his logic here, but at this point in the first chapter, we have a feast for 180 days and 2 feasts for 7 days. And we have the first decree, and we have the second decree in chapter 2, verse 4. And then you have 2 gatherings of the virgins. Okay, so that, to me, I mean, there's a whole bunch I don't understand about Esther, but verse 19 is the one that I don't see in the story of Esther any logic that allows you to place where the second gathering of the virgins is. But based upon what we understand about the other prophecies, the second gathering is here.
Yep.
Second gathering. Because we know that from 9/11 to the Sunday law is the fulfillment of the parable of the 10 virgins, but we know that at the midnight cry in this history, that the Levites are gathered here, the priests are gathered here. We're seeing two gatherings. So this is the first gathering, but in either case, this is the fulfillment of the parable of the 10 virgins. So, based upon the prophetic structure, first gathering here, second gathering here. Now, yesterday, and I'm still going to argue this position, but I'm saying that the 12 months of purification of Esther takes her to the marriage at the Sunday law. Is there also a marriage at the midnight cry? Yes. What's the marriage at the midnight cry?
Marriage of Cana.
The marriage of Cana. So you could argue that Esther's married here, all right? But this is the difficulty of fractals. Okay, where we were at yesterday, and I think Mark has maybe some different conviction. This is what I'm talking about. He can explain. Is we're seeing this is a purification period, and purification period in 2 Chronicles 29. First they cleanse the sanctuary, then they cleanse the courtyard. Okay, so you have this the time of the temple. Let's put it that way. The courtyard. And what kind of evidence, what kind of support do we have that in Esther so far?
Purification.
6 and 6.
The two feasts. 180 days, and then in the court, they have the feast for the people, courtyard. Okay, but we know this is the purification of the priests from other, is it I-E or E-I?
I-E-S.
And the Levites. So what we proposed yesterday is this is the 6 months of myrrh, and this is the 6 months of sweet smelling and other things for purification. 2 purification periods in this history. But if I recall right, and he can correct me,
I can't remember.
you put the 2 6s here because it's the second angel's message, is what you're saying.
Well, no, not just because of that. I haven't got my notes. I was looking for it in here, but there was several reasons for it.
Yeah, and I think some of his logic that he uses is in the next couple chapters, so we'll hold that in abeyance until we get there.
If we compare with the Kohenites or the high priest that had to do their cleansing before they entered to finish the Day of Atonement, they had to go through a purification a whole lot more detailed than Levites. Levites didn't have to go through what the priests had to do.
Yeah, but we're talking about Leviticus 29 identifying the cleansing of the temple. And not Leviticus 29, 2 Chronicles 29. So, what are we leaving out here before we move forward? Why am I arguing that this is the marriage that's referred to? Because this is the primary marriage. This is where Christ moves into the most holy place and receives a kingdom, which is the marriage. All right, but we know there is a marriage here, so you could argue the 12 months are here.
Where is that, Jay?
Where is what?
Where she gets married? I'm looking.
Where she gets married again?
Yeah.
Where Esther gets married?
Where's the 2 6 months?
Well,
In verse 17. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast. Okay, so if this is the case, then you have a feast here
So,
and a release.
yeah, there was the point, verse 20. I had to get there, so I could see.
And the point is,
Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people, as Mordecai had charged her. And she's still hidden.
Oh, yeah.
she's still hidden.
Yeah.
Meaning what? Explain that to us.
Well,
in the church.
we know that in the 9/11 they're hidden. Mordecai charges her, don't reveal yourself. So they're hidden. There's a point in time at the midnight cry where she unveils herself. And we know that further on in the story she does unveil herself because she goes into the king, because she says, though I perish, marking the midnight cry, and she unveils herself. But here, if that marriage was there at the Sunday law, it says right there, a couple of verses right after it, she's not yet revealed herself. That's
There's
what
also
I have a
a
problem
hiding.
with.
There's also a hiding in the midnight cry. She's
I
not
don't-
totally revealed yet.
I don't know if this is accurate, and I don't know if we're bringing up old things, but Elizabeth is there for 100 and how many days?
50.
150 days, which is 5 months, and then there's 1 month to the midnight cry, which would be 6 months. She unveils herself at the end of 5 months, so it wouldn't even be 6 months anyway. It couldn't be the midnight cry.
We've already been down this road. The end of the 5 months is linked together by that 1 month, which is the same point in time. So it's not really.
That's what without getting into that again.
I didn't follow what he said. Perhaps you guys did. So, what Mark is saying here, he's arguing this has to be the marriage of Esther,
Well, you've got the second gathering of the virgins there as well.
which means what?
Well, we just spoke about that. From the prophetic narrative, the virgins are Adventism.
Yeah.
So therefore, you've got two groups in Adventism. So when you get to verse 17, okay, there's this flow that takes place. He marries her. He makes a great feast, and the virgins are gathered together for the second time.
Mark, you have a bug on your neck.
Sorry?
You have a bug on your neck,
Are you?
on the other collar, on the other side. Right on your collar. And you have just for a while.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so if this is the marriage at the end of 12 months, then there's going to be a feast and a release here.
Yeah, I mean, I took because it had 180 days there, that gave us a key. And it specifically, it says 12 months, but it splits it down into 2 6-month periods. That's why I put them as 2 6-month periods are marking that time period, because then it brings you to the midnight cry.
So the thing that is his point of reference is the hiding.
But isn't it true that at the hiding, we're told in the overflowing scourge comes over at the Sunday law that he hides us for a period
Yeah,
of time?
that's what I'm getting at. There's what we've been learning as this prophetic structure is being developed is, we've seen a feast, then we've seen another feast, then we realize there's feasts all along the way. We've seen Islam, then we've seen Islam all along the way. So we may not have yet recognized the hiding in here that is.
But that's not referenced, and I get her point. But it says she's not yet revealed herself. We know that the midnight cry is what reveals God's people, because we're hidden up to that point. But when you make this prediction and it all comes out, you're now the focus of the whole world, so you're not hidden anymore. The hiding at the Sunday law is God hiding you from the wrath that's coming on.
No, the hiding she's talking about is the hiding down in here.
I'm not even sure to label. I'm just saying that are we allowed to say there's only one hiding and we have to put all the hidings in there, or can we define multiple hidings?
He's arguing that here
But that's
the
not
wise
what it
virgins of this history are brought into the public arena. But there's something that goes on here that there's an unsealing too. Because in this history here, Sister White has a statement where she says, the church appears to fall but does not fall. It remains while the sinners in Zion are removed. And that passage is talking about the fact that the church looks like it is going to be done away with, but right here it's revealed as the church triumphant. So there may very well be a hiding in here of the church triumphant that is dealing with this history. Oh, we got some hands going now. Brother Michael first.
I think I'm gonna say the same thing as Tyler. I believe there is a hiding from the midnight cry to the Sunday law marked by Moses, and it's the 3 months. And at that point, then Esther would be, in one sense, when it says she's not yet revealed, that was after she had gained favor in the sight of Haggai.
Okay, now wait a second. I'm trying to think that through. Why is Moses hiding? Why you're placing Moses' birth here?
Mm-hmm.
Tyler.
Why?
The 3 months. We know those are 3 months right there, based on in his context. And at the end of the 3 months, he goes to the daughter of Pharaoh, which is the world at that point. That's the way I've understood it.
6 and 3.
It's primarily based upon the context of the 3 months,
Context of the 3 months, but
which is marked there from the Narcotics.
the birth of Moses is the birth of Christ. The birth of Moses and the birth of Christ, the leaders of the world attempt to kill him. Whether it was Egypt trying to kill Moses or Herod trying to kill Christ. So there are lots of reasons to line up the birth of Moses and the birth of Christ. And in the story of Elizabeth and Mary, where's Christ born?
Just before the close of the week.
Yeah, down here.
They don't try to kill them there, though. They don't.
But the
And
birth
the
and
death
the
decree is
killing
not
are-
there, not at the end, right before the close of
So
probation.
where do all the martyrs die?
I'm saying the death decree is not there. The death decree that Jeff's talking about is not marked before the close of probation.
It's not marked.
It's after. Isn't the death decree? The actual death decree is after the close of probation.
Okay, let's put
Who's in the making?
Elizabeth's line up here.
Well, that would put the hiding after the close of probation there.
There is a high.
If there is
There's
no
a
one after
hiding.
the close
This
of
is-
Yeah,
probation.
but I'm saying that the one that he's talking about.
No, I'm saying if we're gonna parallel it that way, but
Okay,
it
what's
also
this
could be marked there.
in terms of Elizabeth and Mary?
That's what
Zechariah's
Elizabeth. Elizabeth is.
Struck down.
Zechariah. All right, and she's hidden for 5 months. And then you have a double prophecy of Mary and Elizabeth. They come together, receive the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. So you have a double prophecy, Mary and Elizabeth. And 3 months later, John is born, right? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And right here is the incarnation of Christ. And so this is 3 months. Down here, 6 months, he's born. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what Mark and I were saying
There's the cross.
is there's this is his birth. That this is too close to that.
Are you marking a little space there? Is that-
Yeah, I'm trying to.
okay.
Is because the bloodbath, there's got to be a place for the bloodbath. Sister White says, Maranatha, page 199, there will be many martyrs. So at Christ's birth here, the martyrdom that takes place has to happen. But the martyrdom that takes place at Christ's birth and at Moses' birth, Moses and Christ are hidden from it. They're protected, right?
And that's 2 years, the same thing like the 2 years of famine, where basically the people give away everything they have.
No, Moses is hidden for 3 months.
No, I'm talking about the bloodbath took place within 2 years. Jesus was born, and then when he fled, it was around 2 years because Herod gave the command any child between 0 to 2 to be killed.
Right.
Yeah, but in terms of the hiding, what we've got reference in the story of Moses is that he was hidden for 3 months in the...
The only thing I don't understand with that, and I guess I see what you're trying to say.
Trying to say...
I see what you're saying.
All right.
I see what you're saying. The only issue that comes to me with that is that, one, there's not even a 3 months mentioned there, so you're sort of pulling it away from the 3 months that we know exists already. And
One, there is not a 3 months mentioned where?
there's not a 3 months. You can't say that little time right there is specifically mentioned as 3 months. But we can for fact say that.
Doesn't it say that Moses was hidden for 3 months?
No, I know. I'm saying, but right there, to place it there, it's not already a 3 months mark there. But there is for sure one at the midnight cry, to the Sunday law. So you're sort of pulling it away from that.
Yeah, but.
Okay, so let's not pull it away from that.
No, I'm saying.
Then you're going to back up all this history back this way.
The only thing that I saw is we see John as being born of the Sunday law, but initially, and I don't know if we've came to a clear understanding, but we also saw John being born at the time of the end.
Yeah.
John the Baptist. So if John, in the line that John's born at the time of the end, is it wrong to say Christ is born at the midnight cry? Have we worked that out? I don't know. Can they be born at two different spots and two different thoughts?
John is the first angel's message. We know the first angel's message comes at the time of the end. We also know that the first angel's message is proclaimed. That's where the Zechariah speaks. So they both fit there. But Christ being born, I don't know.
So yeah, that's what I was saying. Is if we mark him as being born of the Sunday law and at the time of the end, well then, where in the line of thought that we mark John being born at the time of the end, then we can mark Christ sometime later. We would just have to place where exactly that would be. So this line of thought is, Christ is marked down here, and Moses would be down there too. And another line, then Moses would be backed up, and Christ would be backed up.
Okay, we got to stay on Esther. If we try to work through the line of John the Baptist's birth and.
Isn't it because the message, first and second, third angel's message repeats at 9/11 and it repeats at the Sunday law? Is that how come we can put these same births?
This is the perfect fulfillment of the third angel's message, and all three of them are going to be there, first, second, third. But they're all of these.
Blend.
That's the trick here at the end, is they all get combined.
We should stick to context. We're talking about hidings, but this doesn't say hiding here. It's talking about, she says something specifically. She's not yet been revealed. So, according to the prophetic narrative, God's people are revealed right there at the midnight cry. They become the focus.
Right.
But also,
They're revealed here too.
that
Yes,
was my
yes.
point.
They're lifted
Where
up
the
as an
Sunday law,
ensign.
that's right,
The
yeah.
biggest revelation of God's people is here.
In the book of Esther,
So I think we're struggling with the fractal.
That they-
This is the 112 to 12 months, and this is the 12 months.
So, okay, all right, I can live with that, but it says the virgins were gathered together the second time. We know the virgins are Adventists. That's the main thing why I was going for.
in the book of Esther, Esther is hidden to the king finally, but she's being revealed to those around her, because it points out that after the second time she was moved, Mordecai stayed at the gate, and they knew that there was a connection between her. I mean, those around her knew that she wasn't hidden to those around her. She was hidden to the king, and finally to the king she was really revealed later.
She was hidden.
No, it says that she didn't reveal herself to the people even around her in where she was
But
with
everybody,
the women.
those that took care of her knew that she was related to Mordecai. Mordecai was there, and it says that.
But it's hidden.
But somewhere we read,
Verse 10.
Yeah, but you're reading into it maybe some of the surroundings, but the reason it's telling us that she had not showed herself is it's telling us that she's hidden. She hasn't been revealed yet, if you want to say it in Mark terminology. Go ahead.
On this time when we did the bottom, I'm sorry, I don't remember, when is Christ born? I see the
He's born
pregnancy,
right here.
but right before the close of probation.
Yeah, we used to put it at the close of probation,
Yeah, that's what I'm
and
confused
then
about.
we remembered that when he was born, and Moses' birth typified his, that there's a persecution that takes place, and there's a bloodbath at the end of the world. So this 3 months that Moses was in hiding, when Pharaoh was trying to kill all the babies in Egypt, is typifying the birth of Christ, when Herod was trying to kill all the babies for 2 years. So somewhere at the close of probation, is there any more martyrs?
There's no
No.
promise of it.
So he has to be born before the close of probation in order to mark that bloodbath.
So there's hidings on both sides of the close of probation, is what
It's
I'm
just
trying
one
to say.
hiding.
Hidden from the
Yes.
overwhelming scourge, hidden from the...
There's a
everyone
hidden
else
there,
hiding.
hidden there, and there's a hidden here, which tells me there's a hidden
I
here,
just don't see.
and there's a hidden over here.
Okay. Sorry.
Could Moses
Thank
just
you.
be a fractal like Michael was saying? That you could put him in both spots like you could do with other people, other things? Is that a
Can
reasonable?
Moses be a
Like-
fractal?
We're saying
Or
there's a,
because
yeah.
you've got the 3 months there.
because the 3 months is there, and then you're saying it also typifies his at one level
But
his.
it could be a fractal, but what you would have to do is take this 3 months and put it in here, and then back all this up, and see what it does for you down here in this end, right?
Well, you could. All you gotta do really is mark that.
Wait, why would you have to insert it there? There's already 3 months there. You already have it on
Be-
the board.
because you're not going to break the chain that is establishing the 3 months.
It's
are
just
you?
another. It would just be another line of thought. You don't even need to bring up. Elizabeth, to that effect, Elizabeth doesn't matter. That line of the line that you're laying down there, those bursts. If you just say, based on Ezra 7:9, we know we have 3 months there, and what's the
4 months.
4 months? Yeah, 3 months and a 4 month, without bringing in Elizabeth and Mary and all that, because Moses only by typification is related to Christ. So you could just put him there and say, based on Ezra 7:9, there's a 3 months there. That's all I'm saying. But I also see strongly the connection you're saying at the end of that.
I think you're
Maybe
you
I'm
may be
stretching.
holding on to a very nice preconceived idea. We'll have to line that other line up. I disagree that you can't just take this 3 months here of Moses' birth.
You're
I
pulling
don't
the 3
think
months away from the only thing that says 3 months. That's all I'm saying.
I'm not prepared to say that it's the only thing that says 3 months.
All right.
The way this thing's opening up.
No, so far, thus far.
Yeah.
The only thought that I had was that backing it up, like you're saying, to back it up would not be difficult if we do mark John the Baptist's birth at the time of the end. Because then you have your starting point, and then you have your ending point at the 3 months, and all you have to do is show how that matches up. How this you only really have to match up that 9 month period because you already know John the Baptist is born at this time of the
Yeah, but you'd have to say from time of the end to the midnight Christ 6 months.
year. You would have to say the time of the end. Why?
Because
Because his
5
birth.
and 1.
it was John, the 6 months between them.
Now, where does this
Hey, wait a second.
months go?
Let's try to move a little bit further on in Esther. There's still a big. We haven't necessarily solved everything in here. What I'm seeing is it's a fractal. She gets married here. At the end of when she goes in, there's a marriage here.
Now, there's where does the 6 months go? The 2 6 months.
Well, if you're doing it to here, then the 2 6 months is a doubling in this history that represents the arrival of the second angel at 9/11. That's the logic there. You said they're repeating in large. They're
Okay, but how do you get around the second gathering?
the second gathering of the virgins. How do you get?
That's the problem. I don't have a problem with fractals.
Are there no virgins gathered here? Is the question. No virgins gathered here.
They
That's
are.
the final
They're-
gathering.
they're-
There is a gathering here. What happened on October 22nd,
All
1844?
the
They went
virgins
to
gathered
the
together and
Holy
went to
Ghost.
The wise virgins moved into the
Oh,
most
that's
holy
right.
place with Christ.
Yeah. And that's where they're set up, as the ensign, right there.
Okay,
The ensigns gathered there.
Yeah, and
The
and the Sunday
144,000.
law is where the virgins, the wise virgins are
but
raised
it
up.
says the second time. That's the first one.
It says the second time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
but at this length,
Or no, the first one's at 9.
at this one, where would be the first gathering?
9/11.
9/11. Where would the second gathering be?
Midnight cry.
Right here.
Yeah.
Sunday.
Well, you got
At the
it.
Sunday
Depending on
law.
the fractal level.
Yeah,
In the this one here, the second
12
gathering
months.
is here. This is the conclusion of the parable of the 10 virgins, and they're gathered into the most holy place. But if we're putting the 12 months here in a fractal, the first gathering's here and the second gathering's here. And there's a marriage here. The marriage of Cana. So what we're struggling with is the fractal, I think. Because it's hard for me. The difficulty for me is I understand Mark's logic, and I think it's a fractal, so I think it's valid. But here you have 180, and if you're doing 6 months purification and 6 months purification, 6 months is 180. That's just a really strong connection that is hard to move away from. But when you see there's a marriage here and a marriage here, and do we believe that the wise virgins of the Millerite history were gathered into the most holy place at this waymark?
Yes.
Okay, so there's a double
So
gathering.
what are we saying, verse 20 then? Esther had not yet showed her kindred nor her people as Mordecai charged her.
Here,
Yeah.
I would think this is the church triumphant that appears to fall in this history. It gets lifted up. I don't know that yet. I don't know it. I'm going based upon, we got a hiding, and a hiding. Logically, there's a hiding in here of something.
Could we take it and be able to define it better if we could define kindred and people, because that's a two classes that aren't revealed yet. So if we could label, say, kindred as the priests and people as the Levites or some way, then we could put it down there. Who are they? Who are the kindred and the people? Who's her
Hebrews.
kindred? Is she from the priests or the Levites, her lineage?
At this level, she's the 144,000.
But who
At
are
this
her
level,
kin?
she's the
Mordecai's
priest.
through what line did we say? Is he through the Levitical line or through what family line does he run through?
Mordecai is a descendant of who?
I don't know. It's a
Benjamin.
run-
That's the descendant of Kish.
Kish.
And he was a priest?
Kish is Saul.
Benjamin.
Benjamin.
Oh, from Benjamin.
So not a Levite. So the kindred
No,
could be the priest.
he's Benjamin is part of Judah.
Yeah.
Benjamin and Judah. So you got Judah and you got Israel.
People. Anyway, okay, sorry.
Are you with us, Brother Jim?
I have a question.
Okay.
And correct me if I'm wrong. In the Bible, we recognize that Jesus, the church is recognized as the bride, but also New Jerusalem is recognized as the bride. So does that mean that Jesus marries the church and also marries?
I don't want to go there. That's a big discussion.
Well, because of the weddings that we're talking about.
Yeah, but I know, but I don't want to go there right now. That is a big discussion. Is New Jerusalem the bride, or are the people the bride? Sister White is very clear in the Great Controversy on that.
And she said, she says in other places. But I think
There you go. But she says in other places. So this is a big.
Yeah.
This is a whole classroom discussion. That point.
I was gonna say, because there's two places where she's clear about both of those.
Yes. So does someone have a computer up and running? Look up. Appears to fall. Sinners. Appears to fall sinners, and it'll bring up that quote. Maybe there, in the word for word readout of that quote, there is some kind of indication of a hiding. The church appears to fall, but does not fall. It remains while the sinners in Zion are removed from it. This is a most trying ordeal. We got to get through chapter 2 today, and the last few verses are also a very tricky one, unresolved, so to speak. We might have some insight on them, but
Appears or
the church, you found it?
It's in the Great
yes,
Controversy.
the church may appear as about to fall, but it does not. It remains while the sinners in Zion will be sifted out, the chaff separated from the precious wheat. This is a terrible ordeal, but nevertheless it must take place. Keep going. Oh, I guess I'm in last day events, so I can't.
Yeah, you need to read the whole thing. It might not be there. The church appears to fall. Okay, so if the church appears to fall, the church is appearing to fall, but is it really falling? No, it's getting lifted up as the church triumphant. But it appears like it's a fallen church. So the church triumphant is hidden. The church triumphant's there, but it's hidden.
When we define the church there, are we defining the church as?
Adventism.
Because I thought Adventism was already passed. Yeah, is that?
All of the above. This is the
The
wheat and tares.
hypocrites,
The
yeah.
context of this is the wheat and tares. The wheat are being separated from the tares. So if it's appearing to fall,
It doesn't seem like.
But it's already been passed by at 9/11 in the midnight cry.
Yeah,
Pardon me?
We're talking about the structure, but not
We're
the
talking
true
about
church.
the structure. So is the true church appear to fall, or does the structure appear to fall?
No, it would be.
Because we're already teaching that passed by at 9/11, continued to be passed by at the midnight cry, so
But they're still there. It's still his church, although he's not using the means through his church. He's using the people within the church. But that church is still his.
what happens to the structure here?
Church of the people.
They become hypocrites. There's wise and foolish virgins in this history. The foolish virgins, what's happened to them here? They become hypocrites.
they join.
Okay, but the hypocrites of here and the hypocrites of here, they're still active in here. Okay, and what's their activity in here? They're doing the omega
That's
apostasy.
okay. They're in
They're performing
delusions.
miracles, but they're going to go down.
In that period of time is where he, no, it would be from 9/11 to
Right
midnight
here.
cry. It was where he chooses their delusions.
So we can't find that quote only from Last Day Events?
No, I found it. You want to read it? Or I can read it. Satan will work his miracles to deceive. He will set up.
Is that in here?
No.
Yes.
Oh, yes. I was
Go ahead.
He will set up his power as supreme. The church may appear as about to fall, but it does not fall. It remains while the sinners in Zion will be sifted out, the chaff separated from the precious wheat. This is a terrible ordeal, but nevertheless it must take place. None but those who have been overcoming by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony will be found with the loyal and true, without spot or stain, without guile in their mouths. We must be divested of our self-righteousness and arrayed in the righteousness of Christ.
So in this history of the church appearing to fall when Satan's doing miracles, that puts it into this history. What is the parable that is used as the context? The wheat and the tares, right? And what's the story of the wheat and tares?
They're together.
They're together.
Well, the tares are gathered
angels
first,
separate 'em.
and the angels separate them. But what is the premier teaching of the wheat and tares?
They grow together till the harvest
Yeah, and we can't pick them out. Why?
because they're hidden.
Because we can't tell the difference. We can't tell that
They're
this
not
is
the
wheat and this is tares. The hearts, the true hearts, if you want to put it that way, are hidden. There's a hiding in here of the church triumphant.
So there's a hiding of that.
Yeah, I think once you see three in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 periods of time, if you see 3 of the periods have a waymark, you can make the assumption
So could there be an internal
that's in every
hiding?
one. Pardon
Could
me?
there be an internal hiding and an external hiding too?
Probably. But let's read the last few verses, at least have it in our memory banks before we close. Sister Kathy, would you read verses 21 through 23?
In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, 2 of the king's chamberlains, Bigthan and Teresh, of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hand on King Azarias. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen, and Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out. Therefore they were both hanged on a tree, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles before the king.
Okay, so they were hanged on a tree. There's our first clue. When does someone get hanged?
Depends on the Friday.
It depends on the fractal. Judas can get hung right here, and he can get hung here. So who's getting hung here?
This is the first one.
This is we put all the 2 guys there at the midnight cry.
Yeah.
That time period.
This is Bigthan.
Hopley and Phineas and all the
Bigthan and what's his name?
Teresh.
Teresh, T-E-R-E-S-H.
Okay, so they get hung right here. This is also, who else is going to get hung in Esther right there?
Haman.
Haman.
And his son.
Okay, so What is it that Mordecai's a hero over?
He saved the king.
He saves the king, but how? He identifies
Esther.
these bad guys in this history. He's a hero of the time period of the Midnight Cry. But there's still, there's still issues about that. Okay, we'll keep pushing through. Who had opening prayer?
Me.
Sister Tanya, you want to pray?
Father in heaven, we just want to thank you so much for these hours of studies. We thank you for the truth that is being revealed, being refined in our minds, may it also be refined in our hearts, and we're able to exercise this every day of our life. And Father, may we all be found hid in you, that you may shine through us. Please be with us, guide us, and direct us throughout the day. And Lord, help us to remember that we are really living the last moments of this earth history, and that you are waiting patiently for us to take on Christ. In Jesus' name we ask and we thank you. Amen.